Good morning or afternoon, World Studies. It's Mr. Floyd, and we're going to do some notes the video way. This is something that we pull out every once in a while when we have no other, options. And right now, to try to keep us up, with me being gone and trying to keep us from getting behind, I'm going to go ahead and do a round of these with class today. This is you're just going to pretend like I'm in class with you, giving you some notes. You're getting the information that's on the slides here in your right side, and hopefully I'll be giving you some information that you can help, with your left column. And then as usual, your left column also, you can ask your own questions, put your own little commentary in there, but make sure that you're keeping up on that left column as well. All right. And then hopefully I am back with you soon, guys. I'm not enjoying this at all. As far as these notes go, I know that first period you were a little bit off from my other classes, so if you have me for 5th or 7th period, you're probably going to be able to skip over the first part of this and just pick up to where your notes leave off, okay? And so for first period, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. We had left off, we were still focused in with the Mesopotamians, and so this slide focuses on a couple of empires that rise during the time of the Mesopotamians. And so this is where you end up with some people who have control over a little bit more territory. When we think of that word empire, usually we're thinking of a civilization or settlement or that controls itself and then controls others. And so the Akkadians and the Babylonians are what this is about. So Akkadians is a reference to the kingdom of Akkad that you see there for number 1. And Sargon I was the emperor of Akkad. And that is the guy that you see pictured over there on the right side, or at least what we think he looked like. We had some old statues of Sargon I, but a lot of it is kind of guesswork as to what he probably really looked like. He was a guy that kind of had a bigger vision in terms of wanting to create an empire and wanting to control more than just one city-state. And so that's kind of how he went about it, was building up an army and starting the process of going through and in some cases conquering, and in other cases just being able to persuade some of the other city-states in Sumer to combine together under his control and to make themselves even more powerful. So just kind of basically empire building, okay? And his empire lasts for a while until he dies. And when he dies, he leaves the empire to his grandson. And then his grandson ends up dying at a younger age and doesn't really have someone specific that he's left the kingdom to. And so the empire kind of just crumbles apart after that. And that's sometimes how empires will fall. Sometimes they're attacked by others, and sometimes they just kind of fall within. And this would be an example of that. All right, number 2 is the Empire of Babylon. And the ruler of Babylon, the guy that you see pictured over there on the right side, Hammurabi, is how that name is pronounced. And he takes a little bit more of a revolutionary view of government, especially in the idea that government's main role is to protect its people. That's kind of revolutionary thinking for back in these ancient times. A lot of times these rulers kind of ruled just for their own power and, kind of live that lifestyle that they wanted to live and use the wealth and the riches of the empire to just make their life better, and didn't really think too much about the people they ruled, except that, they were there to help them gain power and gain more power. Hammurabi was a little bit different with this, and he took more of the role that he was like that he had a bigger role as the leader. He was a protector, and it was his responsibility to make sure that his citizens were well taken care of and protected. Okay? And then Hammurabi, probably best known for what comes to be known as the Code of Laws. And so when you've ever heard that saying, an eye for an eye, it was the idea that, if you committed wrong, then what your punishment should be should kind of equate to the wrong. And so, if you steal from someone, then you have things taken from you. If you get into a fight and take someone's eye out in the midst of that fight, then you're going to lose an eye. So it literally was just kind of this literal idea of justice, that whatever you do wrong is what you're going to, in effect, pay the price for doing wrong. And one of the first known systems of law that was used for the people. Okay? All right, and then from there, we're going to shift gears over to Egypt. And we'll go very quickly. This is another example of another civilization that established itself along a river system. In this case, the Nile River Valley, and a river that is able to create lots of good growing land around on each bank of the river. So for growing plants and raising livestock, things like that, being able to sustain a civilization. So very similar to what we learned about the Mesopotamians locating themselves along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The Egyptian civilization, they locate themselves along the Nile. They have a form of government that we call centralized, which means that you have one big government that kind of controls all of the Middle East area where the Egyptians are living. And this is kind of the opposite of having power all spread out and having kind of smaller rulers have their own little chunks of land. The people who ruled were called pharaohs, right? Kind of like the image that you see pictured there on the left. And these were, for the most part, it was kind of patriarchal, but we will end up having some examples of some of the leaders of Egypt that are women that we'll talk about here in a moment. Hieroglyphics is one of the major accomplishments of the Egyptians. The kind of a combination of words and pictures. And so this is something that we still have examples that we can look back to today that have been translated, but it gives them their system of writing, just like we had, cuneiform with the Mesopotamians. Kind of one of those, when we think of what are some of the things that make these ancient civilizations, what they are, having that system of writing is an important part of that. I'm not going to go through the long list of achievements like we did with the Mesopotamians, but math and architecture, especially when you think about the pyramids and the Sphinx and all the incredible building that they did, especially with the crude technology that they had back then. So big time architects, and then also big thinkers when it came to the Middle East. That part of the world will be kind of the home of a lot of math. That algebra, calculus, all comes from kind of more of like Southwest Asia, kind of Middle East area. And then last but not least, women in Egypt actually were treated a little better than we see in some of these other ancient civilizations. Women were seen as being more equal under the law in Egypt. And then, like I mentioned, there were some women who actually rose up to take the position of, basically like queen. Some of you have heard the name Cleopatra. There was her. There were others that rose all the way up to becoming leaders in Egypt. And so even though the patriarchy is still very strong, women do have a little more rights and a little more status in ancient Egypt. Okay. All right. Moving on to the next slide here. Like I said, I still feel like I'm playing catch up, but I think this is kind of getting into new territory for everyone. Another ancient civilization was called Indus, and it gets that name from where it's located, South Asia, India, where we'd see on the map nowadays. Another one, again, we should see a theme centering here, that located along a river, the Indus River, that you can still go and visit in kind of between, kind of right there in between Pakistan and India nowadays. And you kind of see it running right along in there. And that's where they located themselves. Again, the rivers, those are what bring life. And so no big shocker, right, that they all these early civilizations are locating themselves along major river systems. The people of Indus, like it says there, did a lot of business with their neighbors to the west, Mesopotamia. And so we'll see really, really early on here that people are figuring out how to trade with each other, kind of figuring out, what they have, what their neighbors have, and what they want from each other, and just doing a lot of trade and barter, that sort of way. These early civilizations usually don't have any kind of like a money system yet, so everything is pretty much straight up trade. Also, let's see, polytheistic, so they worship all kinds of different gods and goddesses, and talks about technology, for their time, and also urban planning. And kind of the picture you see there on the right side, what that means is a reference to actually planning out their cities. Instead of just letting them kind of randomly come together, to actually come up with an idea of drawing out a grid and having a plan when you build your cities. And while we don't have much left of the ruins of ancient Indus, it's kind of an artist's view of what they think some of those cities would have looked like, kind of walled in, and then everything very highly ordered, streets built on grids and that kind of a thing. So that's what we mean by urban planning, right? And then they also have a written language, and it stands a little bit different, a little bit apart from the others in that there's parts of it that have been deciphered, but the entire language still has yet to be completely figured out. And so there's a lot of ancient writings from the Indus people that we still don't really know what they're writing about, whether it's just more of those government records or stories. Maybe someday someone will come up with a computer program that'll finally be able to break the code. But so far, not a completely deciphered language, which sets it a little bit different than a lot of these other ancient civilizations that we know everything that they wrote about. All right? Okay, from there we move on to China. And, you guys were doing an assignment last week on this, the dynasties of China. And so just kind of catching up with all of that. Another river civilization, the Huanghe River, up along in northern China, that you can see on that tiny little map right up there, is where this ancient civilization built itself up on, for the same reason that everyone else is building their settlements and civilizations along rivers. Another example of a centralized government, and so instead of having rulers, all kinds of different rulers spread out all over the land, you're going to have just one big government that's going to be ruled by usually some kind of a dynastic leader. We'll get into that word dynasties here later on. And even early on, some of the early Chinese religions like Confucianism focus a lot on that idea of honoring the people that your family members that lived before you. And so this whole concept of ancestry being part of it. And so you had to live a good life, because if you didn't, you were not only dishonoring yourself, but you're dishonoring your entire family, including people who've already lived and died. Okay? It's kind of part of what they help to kind of keep control of their civilization. And then a couple examples, because just so we know that not every single ancient civilization back then. Sorry, guys, my voice is trying to hang out. But that there not every single civilization was always focused around a river, and so a couple examples of that. And these are both. We're both here. I'm going to drop these both in. Both going to the Americas, which we've been kind of ignoring so far. We've been pretty much all kind of stuck in kind of Africa and Southwest Asia and South Asia, a little bit of East Asia now there with China, a little bit with China. But the Olmec people, which kind of predated the Mayans that some of you may have heard of before, and so that's getting there in Central America. And then the Chavan people, which predate the Incan Empire down in the Andes mountain range. down in South America, and both of them they're close to water sources in terms of the Olmeca right there. They've got the Caribbean on one side, the Pacific on the other. The Andes not as much up there in the mountains, not as much on the water sources there. But both of them are able, regardless of that, to build up pretty incredible civilizations of their own religious beliefs, their own forms of technology, and then like it talks about, they're also going to involve themselves in trading with a lot of their neighbors around them. Okay. On here. All right, now we're going to shift gears and we're going to focus on kind of the development of some new religious faiths coming about in some of these early times. And this will be some of these as we start to slowly kind of move a little bit further and further out of the BCE to the CE time frame, kind of getting out of the ancient times, but still will pretty much be in there. With A there, we talked about animism, where people mainly are worshiping elements of nature. Portable faith is a reference to the kind of religious beliefs you can have that you can take anywhere with you. The problem with a lot of animism back in these ancient times is people were worshiping something that was like connected directly to the land. So, they were worshiping maybe like a river or the ocean or the mountains or a specific kind of animal that lived in an area. And that's fine, except, if you feel like you need to leave that area for some reason, the thing that you've been worshiping, you're leaving behind as well. And so portable faith means you can practice this religion anywhere you go. It's not connected to something that's specific to, geography, that kind of a thing. It's portable. You can take it with you. Okay. One of the first examples of a portable faith is Hinduism. And this is one that's going to get its start in South Asia, specifically in modern day area of Pakistan and India. This is one that starts out as being polytheistic, and so they had a number of different gods and goddesses that they worship, but over time it will eventually become more of the worship of just one god and become monotheistic. Reincarnation, the idea that when you die you come back as another living form, and that may be, and you have no control over what that's going to be. It could be another person, it could be an animal, but reincarnation being one of the big kind of parts of their belief system. And then their religious system in this part of the world also is what ties into what they call their caste system. And this is kind of like how they arrange their society. You would be born into a family that belongs somewhere on this little pyramid. And whatever your family was that you were born into is pretty much what you were going to be for your entire life. You couldn't really move your way up or move your way down in that caste system. It's very, very rigid. There's still remnants of the caste system that exist in parts of India and Pakistan today. But it didn't matter how smart you were or dumb you were or how hard you worked, any of that sort of thing. You were what you were. And if you were lucky, you were born up there near the top. And if you were not so lucky, you're going to be down there like the very bottom, the people they called the untouchables. And just the way that things operated in their culture, right? The caste system. All right. C, we'll shift over to another newer faith during these ancient times, and that is Judaism. And this one's going to be a little bit different in that from the very, very beginning, Judaism is going to be a religion that is completely monotheistic. And this will be the faith of the Jewish people. Back then, they're being referred to as basically as the Hebrews or Israelites. And let me go here. There we go. where they're located. Actually, back in the days when Judaism was first established, according to the map we have over here, they called the land Canaan, that you see right there. And what we nowadays look on the map and see as Israel. Like I said, monotheistic. They worshipped only one God, who they referred to as Yahweh. And the religion itself is established by Abraham. And this is going to also be a religion that will, kind of at its roots, Christianity will have connections to this, and then eventually Islam will have some connections to this as well. Important to the Jewish people is that they see themselves as being what they call a chosen people, that their God Yahweh has chosen them, has given them the land that they have. They see it as a chosen, as basically a promised land that their God gave them, and really all of their belief system is made up into, like what we've got there for number 2, the scriptures in the Old Testament is pretty much the holy book that will kind of govern the Judaistic faith. Okay, so that gets a couple of religions up and running: Hinduism and Judaism. A little gong. I don't know if you could hear that or not. Maybe you could, because we're going to head over and spend a little bit of time here on East Asia, okay, and focus on the rise of China, and we might even take a little bit further than that. So, starting with A, that's pronounced Qin. Okay, I know it looks like Quinn or Kin or whatever, but it's pronounced Qin dynasty. And this is going to be, dynasties are these ruling families that will lead China. And when we think of a dynasty, that's usually what we think. It's in the family. It kind of goes from father to son or father to daughter, depending whether you're patriarchal or matriarchal, or maybe mother to daughter. But when we see dynasty, that's what we want to think about, is that it's not like you're having an election and just picking the best ruler. The rulers are coming from a family line, and it's passed along through bloodlines like that, right? And the Qin dynasty will be this new power. Again, still way back there in pretty much the ancient times. Before the Qin dynasty establishes itself, China is going to be very, very much a what we call an agriculturally based civilization. They grow a lot of wheat, they grow a lot of rice, and most of the vast majority of the population are farmers, right? So they how they make their living. You have these people who are called aristocrats, and they are people who usually have been born into wealth, and that wealth usually comes from owning land. Okay, and so a lot of times they own land, they own farms. A lot of the people that work for them are, again, the bulk of the population of China. They're people who are fairly poor themselves, and so that's kind of what they do. They work for these nobles on their farms, and then, like it says there, the nobles, besides providing them, a place to live and food to eat and all that, also have this implied promise that they will protect them. So it's kind of this dual protection. The peasants, they work for the nobles, and they protect them. And everyone's trying to, it's an entire system of everyone helping each other to protect each other. Okay. And in these early days before the Qin dynasty, we have a very, what we call, decentralized forms of government in China. So you have all these different aristocratic nobles who have their own little kingdoms, and they fight against each other, fighting to try to grow the size, to make their little kingdoms larger than those nearby, just trying to gain more land, more wealth, more power that way. And China overall is kind of a mess, because you have just all these, basically like little civil wars that are always being fought all over the place by these different, nobles and trying to increase the size of their kingdoms. Oh, another gong sound. I assume you guys are hearing those. All right, so Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, will be the one who brings in the Qin dynasty. Okay, he's born to a fairly important family. This isn't going to be one of those rags to riches stories where he starts out with nothing. He already comes from a family that has wealth and has power. But he sees himself early on as a unifier. He has a vision of a bigger, more powerful China, and wants to get beyond all the little wars that all these different nobles fight against each other. And so what he does is goes about starting to build up his own military forces. At first, he has to kind of act like everyone else and, kind of take out one kingdom after another. But after a while, he has a big enough army to where he can pretty much declare that he's out to unify all of China, to make one whole powerful China instead of all of these warring little kingdoms. Once he gains that power, once he has China unified under his Qin dynasty, he is going to make order these major building projects. He has the Great Wall built up along the northern border of China to basically to protect from enemies that are up in the north. There's the Manchurians, eventually to be the Mongols. He also orders the building of a massive canal to help with to ease trade in China and be able to get goods from that are like farm products from way inside China out to some of the other parts of China where there's kind of growing cities, that kind of a thing. And he also orders the building of a massive army of warriors made of clay. Qin has this incredible fear of death, and he's still not really an old man when he starts to begin to plan for his death. And in his mind, he's not really going to die. He's just going to move on to the afterlife. But when he does, he wants a massive army to be able to protect him. And so he has this army built up of tens of thousands of these life-size, human-size, gigantic statues like you see there. And has this gigantic tomb made where he has his army all set up, horses and soldiers. And when he dies, he's buried along with them. And then for really thousands of years, we don't even know it exists. It's discovered back in the probably, I guess, about 50, 60 years ago. And they've been slowly excavating the Terracotta Army ever since then. Would be one of those awesome things to be able to see in person, the next time in China. Unfortunately for Qin, he doesn't, kind of like we talked about with Sargon, doesn't leave a really good system for having his place taken over. Or at least those who take over for him do not have the same kind of force of personality that he has. And after Qin dies, you kind of see things kind of go backwards, and a little bit of that, like it says, a little bit of that chaos and a little bit more of that infighting start to take place again. And so, it looks like for a while there, it's like, okay, China's powerful, and now it's going backwards. Hear the gong, so you know we're still on the Chinese topic. All right, so let's go ahead and cover this one in here. Like I said, with Qin gone, things are going to struggle for a while, but then a new family will rise up and commit itself to trying to pick up where Qin had left off, and so the Tang dynasty will come in. And we see that word reunifying the country. So trying to get order back established and getting all these little wars tamped down. and to get China back under the power of a single dynasty. This is going to kind of usher in a period of peace for China, where people are going to be able to focus on getting creative and inventing a lot of really awesome stuff. Movable type printing. So instead of books being written by hand, the idea of being able to have type print and being able to print off pages for books, which will put the Chinese ahead of a lot of other parts of the world. The Chinese will invent the magnetic compass that will help in being able to determine direction, and later on help people when they're navigating and traveling over land and eventually even over sea. The Chinese will invent paper and will be one of the first empires that will establish a paper currency money. But they also are using that paper for for printing for books and things like that, and they're the first civilization we know of that actually used paper for toilet paper. Right? Don't know if they made Charmin, but something close to it. And then the invention of gunpowder, which when it first is invented is made more for like celebrations, Chinese New Year and things like that, but eventually will be adapted to warfare purposes. Okay. All right. We're going to finish off this section with China, and I think that will be enough for us today. Okay. The Chinese, who create other things like amazing silks and carpets, like you see over there, are going to establish trade with the West. When I say the West, I mean kind of heading out towards Southwest Asia, eventually off onto Europe, and there'll be things that the Chinese will want wool from them, and then people from the West will want silk from China. There'll be a lot of other trade goods besides those, but those are a couple examples. And they'll establish a network of roads that collectively we call the Silk Roads, or Silk Road. I guess I have it singular there. But really it's a whole network of kind of roads and trails that merchants and traders will be using to get things east to west and west to east. So one of the first major trade routes of world history that will be established there, the Silk Roads. And this kind of what sometimes people kind of refer to as kind of like a golden age in China, where again you have the Tang Dynasty that has things under control. You have trade flourishing. You have the Chinese inventing all kinds of amazing new things to make life easier, and it is going to result in a China that is going to be doing very well for itself for a while. Quality of life expectancy will go up even for the poorest people, and China is going to see itself as quite possibly about the most powerful civilization in the known world at that time. There really is no one else that early on that is going to come very close to touching them. While they are flourishing with all of this, Europe is very, very far behind. And Southwest Asia, the Middle East, kind of catching up. Okay, all right. I think that is all we are going to cover, because I think from there we head on to where do we? Yep, we do head on to Europe. We haven't really spent any time on there, and we've got a fair bit to cover with Europe and the rise of the Roman Empire and things like that. So that's what we'll have waiting for us yet when I finally get back to school. I'm really hoping tomorrow's the day, guys. Fingers crossed. But that'll cover you for your notes. Okay, make sure that you fill in your left column. Make sure that if you finished up pages of notes, you go down and get your summaries taken care of. And like I said, that will have us set for the rest of this week. All right. Okay. Hope to see you very soon.